aho bicaye baradusabira abo bavandimwe aho bicaye aho bicaye. Hello and welcome to HMG Network, broadcasting live from the Greater Washington Metropolitan. My name is Freeman Singirankabo, and this is another round of discussion on the Rwandan genocide. It is only fair that I should actually do the introduction again so that everyone can be on the same page. So Claude, if you would allow me to properly introduce you. My apologies to all our viewers. Our technical difficulties have not allowed us to start this conversation as we should. So as I was saying to you, our topic for today's discussion is going to be the Rwandan genocide as a tool of repression. And today we are going to focus on weaponizing genocide against its survivor who speak truth to power. And as I have already told you, I have Claude Gatebuke, who's the Executive Director for the African Great Lakes Action Network. And we also have Corinne Kanimba, who's the daughter of Paul Rusesabagina, who is the real-life hero of the Hotel Rwanda. Now, with that in mind, if Claude, you are able to hear me, do nod and then let me know that you can hear me.
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay, Claude, take it away, please.
Thank you for this introduction, Freeman. I look forward to this conversation with you and Karine, where we'll tell our stories and also share with the world what how our stories, our survival of the multiple and many attempts by the regime in Rwanda by Paul Kagame to push us to use our survival as a weapon to continue to do harm to others and our continued resistance, and what happens to other survivors who do the same thing as we are doing. So I look forward to the conversation.
Thank you so much. Corinne Kanimba, please welcome as well. And give yourself a little bit of an introduction so that people will know who you are.
Thank you for inviting me on your show and for having the idea of creating the space for conversation. I think it's a very important conversation to have, and there are so many of us that have fallen victim of this regime, and the more of us have the courage to not only stand up and speak about our stories, to share and to come together to not only shed light on this injustice, but also make it end. And so I thank you for having me on the show, and for also giving me the opportunity to continue to share the story of my father and hopefully help save his life.
Thank you, Corinne. So basically the way we are going to run this conversation today, we are going to be co-piloting. All three of us are going to share the conversation. And just so that you know, guys, you do see a strange picture right next to me. This is one of my I love this gentleman. I love this brother. He's the late Kizito Mihigo right next to me. Today is the week that we are remembering him, his life legacy. So I have invited him to join us in our studio today. And with that in mind, Claude, can you go ahead and give us the background on our stories as we share the conversation, and then we will exchange back and forth as we go. Go ahead, Claude.
Thank you for inviting Kizito to this conversation.
Absolutely.
So I hope that you are smiling from up above by seeing people speak truth to power, because that is what you were killed for, telling the truth and resisting the temptation to minimize or deny people's stories, and your empathy, and speaking up on it. So thank you, Freeman, for inviting him. We will be talking about Kizito, among other survivors who have been persecuted. Kizito was killed for speaking up and telling the truth about not only the genocide, but also the genocide that was committed in '94 against Tutsi people, but also the massacres that were committed against Hutu people and other killings that took place. We'll talk more about that as we go. We were talking about our stories, but also we are going to share on the persecution of other genocide survivors, starting with Idamange, a young woman, a mother who is highly persecuted today in Rwanda for speaking up and telling the truth. And we'll actually get to hear from her, her own words. We hear her own words. And there's Amable Karasira, an artist like Kizito. Kizito was a gospel artist. Amable Karasira is a musician. We also will speak about Deo Mshahidi, another genocide survivor who spoke the truth, and we'll talk about how he did it and why he was persecuted. Today, he's serving life in prison in Rwanda. And lastly, we'll continue to shed light on the story of Paul Rusesabagina, who was kidnapped 6 months ago from Dubai and taken to Rwanda for to be tried in Rwanda by the Kagame regime. And the reasons are so similar. So I wanted to start with a little bit of background, because most of you watching this show are not Rwandans, and you may not know or understand, may not even know where Rwanda is on the map. Rwanda is a very small country in East Central Africa. It's well known for it's known for two things. One is the genocide, the Rwandan genocide that took place in 1994. The second is the film Hotel Rwanda. Those are the two things that it's the country is known for. So if you watch the film Hotel Rwanda, that's probably the first place or one place that you've heard of Rwanda. So the three of us here are from Rwanda, and the people that we're talking about are in Rwanda. Rwanda is also under, it's ruled by a brutal dictator. His name is Paul Kagame, and his party is called the RPF, the Rwandan Patriotic Front, which started out as a rebel group that started a war in 1990, invaded Rwanda, started in Uganda, came to Rwanda, fought for 4 years, killed people on their way. I mean, massacres where they would call people to meetings, large meetings, and throw grenades into the crowds of people. And sometimes they would kill them with hand weapons. They committed major atrocities leading up to the genocide. Then when the genocide happened, the extremist Hutu, so the RPF was and still is today predominantly a Tutsi led party. So just so you understand, Rwanda has three ethnic groups. The Hutus are the majority. The Tutsis are the next majority. And then there's the Twas, who are supposed to be 1% of the population, but they're much less than 1% of the population, but they're actually the indigenous people of Rwanda. So think of it as the Native Americans or the natives in Canada, or the Aboriginals in Australia, or the Maoris in places like New Zealand. So the original inhabitants who are on the brink of extinction, basically. That's kind of the who the Twa people are, which we're not going to talk a lot about them today. But it's a highly endangered population, especially in Rwanda. There's less than 30,000 people, Twa people in Rwanda. So the rebel group, the RPF, was a Tutsi rebel group. And today still, Rwanda is led by a small clique of Tutsi elite. The government at the time was predominantly Hutu. So the war went on for 4 years, then a genocide started, and the majority Hutus, the extremists among the Hutu people, started butchering Tutsis, and they killed Tutsis with hand weapons, all kinds of major atrocities. That's when I was first touched personally, directly by this conflict and the atrocities. At first, I had seen refugees. We had hosted refugees. We had seen people with crazy stories. I had seen injured people, but this time, basically, it hit the fan. And during our flight, fleeing our home and fleeing the city of Kigali, we were sheltered by multiple families at various times, and that was very dangerous for them to do. But they did it. At some point, I was made to dig my own grave with my mother. So there were multiple attempts on our lives. This one is the one where I was, besides being bombed and shot and actually being hit at times, this was the closest. However, what's happened since, as I started telling my story publicly, the government of Rwanda came to me and asked me to change my story so that I can tell the official narrative, or the narrative that the Rwandan government and the RPF, who are actually perpetrators and also took part in this genocide, to tell a story that favors them, that basically does not talk about those atrocities that they committed leading up to the genocide, the atrocities that they committed during the genocide, and the atrocities, the millions of people that they've killed in the Congo. I refused to do that. They offered me money, they offered me jobs, they offered me opportunities, they offered me all kinds of things, positions, and I refused. Then they turned to threatening me with violence, including I get death threats all the time. If you check my timeline everywhere on social media, it's there. Some of it is so graphic, you can tell that those people have actually killed people in some of the gruesome things that we've heard. They have turned to threatening my family, harassing my family. I mean, they use everything to try to basically silence me, but I have refused, like Karim, like Freeman, like others, other brave people that we're going to talk about. We have refused to use our stories to serve a dictatorship, to serve another genocidaire, because I say this very clearly. Paul Kagame and the RPF are genocidaires. They committed genocide in the Congo. And when you look at the ethnic cleansing that they committed in Rwanda, systematically, they committed genocide by the definition of genocide, regardless of whether this has been recognized internationally or not. A fact is a fact. And so I've refused to use my story to serve them. I've refused, I know that they use it as blackmail or as a tool of repression inside of Rwanda, but also as blackmail internationally. And for that, I've been rewarded with all those threats. And, if they ever got their hands on me, they would definitely kill me. However, the last thing they're doing now is threatening to kidnap me and take me back to Rwanda like they did Paul Rusesabagina. And speaking of that, I want to bring in Karim to also talk about you survived this genocide, yourself. And wanted you to share, I just shared what would happen to me if this government of Rwanda under Kagame got their hands on me. What would happen to you? Share with us a little bit the story and what, how you were treated by this government.
Yeah, so I myself am a survivor of the genocide as well. So is most of the Rwandan people, basically the story, and I can explain sort of not only my story, but what happens to my father up until today. Why my father was kidnapped and is currently being held illegally in Rwanda. As you know, most of you have watched the movie Hotel Rwanda, which is based on Paul Rusesabagina's role in saving the lives of over 1,268 people in the Hotel de Mille Collines in Kigali during the genocide. Prior to that, I was personally with my biological parents, who were both killed during the genocide. They were both Tutsis and were unfortunately killed. Afterwards, I was reunited with Paul and Rusesabagina and Tatiana, who are my biological aunt and uncle. They adopted my sister and I after the genocide and have raised us as their own children ever since. My father, after the genocide, he started experiencing threats while living in Rwanda. So he fled Rwanda to come to Belgium with the family, and we sought political asylum here in 1996. In 1996, he then eventually became a Belgian citizen in 2000, but the threats of our lives and our whole family while being in Rwanda were too grave that we could not stay there, and therefore made a new home in a new country. However, the threats followed and continued to follow until when we even moved to the United States. My father, after the movie Hotel Rwanda came out in 2004, my father started using his newly gained international platform to not only teach people about the genocide, the Rwandan genocide, teach people about lessons that we all learned from the genocide in order for it never to happen again, but also to expose the continuation of injustice and human rights violation being committed by the current government of Rwanda. And he has this sentence in his book, and he's often said it in interviews as well, where he says, the music has changed, the dancers have changed, but the music remains the same. So what we were seeing back then is what we're seeing today. And this is exactly what he uses his platform to show. Because of that, he became a direct target of the Rwandan government, of Paul Kagame's government. Not only initially, after the Hotel Rwanda was released, the government of Rwanda actually liked the movie. They praised him. They put him. They wanted to hire him in the government and offered him positions of minister and ambassadorships, anything he wanted. But he refused because he first believed that there had not been a real truth and reconciliation process in Rwanda, given everything that we know that was committed by the current government. But on top of that, the continuation of human rights, of systematic violations of human rights in Rwanda. And so he thought that we needed to have not only a real conversation about that reality, but also to continue to try to bring help for the Rwandan people and any people in the world that continue to be victims of this government. So he used his platform. He continued to try to unify people, to bring people together around the table in order to have these conversations. And that bothered the Rwandan government, that bothered the dictatorship of Rwanda, because now you had a human rights activist shedding light, that had an international platform, shedding light on the injustice that they have for many years tried to hide and that have been misleading people into believing that the current day Rwanda is different than what the reality actually is. So throughout the years from 2004 until 2020, he faced intimidation, assassination attempts. They've broken into our homes several times. They've gone to his events, to multiple events, to try and not only harass him, but intimidate him and silence him, essentially, because he dared to speak up, because he dared to dream for a better Rwanda where people can come together and not only speak the truth, mourn their dead, but also have a peace and true democracy in Rwanda. And obviously that rhetoric did not please Kagame, did not please the Rwandan government, and obviously that also is different from the story that they want to be told. And he ended up, however, even despite this intimidation, he continued to speak up and he continued to use his platform because of the fundamental belief in a better world, in a better place for Rwanda, in a better place for anyone in the world, really. And this leads us to August of 2020, where and he was traveling in Dubai and he was kidnapped and forcefully taken to Rwanda and now accused of terrorism, false allegation of terrorism, made up allegations. Yeah.
Thank you, Karine, for sharing. I remember when they first started accusing Paul Rusesabagina in the early days, when they started accusing your dad of funding armed groups. There was actually, we had a press conference in 2010, August 2010, at the National Press Club studio. You may have a picture of the press conference. Freeman himself was there at this press conference. The ambassador, Paul Kimonyo, I think his name is Paul Kimonyo, James Kimonyo, came to the meeting. He started heckling us, and eventually there he is, right there speaking. And the next person is Amira Woods and myself. So we gave him space to speak, and he came and accused Paul Rusesabagina of funding rebel groups in the Congo. So we asked him for the evidence, and he had this nervous smile, and he says, "Oh no, I can't give you this. I can't give you the evidence. It's a judicial." So then, a little bit later, and Freeman, you were there again at this time. The Foreign Minister Louise Mushikiwabo and the Rwanda's general prosecutor, it's like an attorney general in America. His name was Martin Ngoga. They came to another meeting, made the same accusation. They asked him for evidence, and they came out with some Western Union. It was two, I think, if I remember correctly, two Western Union transactions. The two Western Union transactions were less than $1,000. And somebody shook their head in that meeting and goes, "Your words are cheap." And it was so ridiculous. And Freeman, I just want you to also speak about your own experience, because not only have you also experienced these threats, the harassment and the coercion, but some of it came directly from this ambassador. I remember we have a video of that. They've sent spies and people to stalk us and stalk you and stalk me at various things that we've done. I want you to also speak on that and share your experience. And again, we refuse to use our experiences of surviving the genocide. Or by the way, they accuse all of us who survived the genocide of denying the genocide. And I don't know how you can talk about there was a genocide committed against Tutsi people and be denying genocide, and there was a genocide committed against Hutu people. If anything, we can be accused of being way too much of, we recognize and accept all the genocides. But anyway, Freeman, I want you to speak on your own experience.
Thank you, Claude. It's a really privilege, Corinne, to be sharing with you guys these stories, especially that right now we have to speak our own truth, to speak our experience, especially some of the things that we have never shared with you before. Just as Claude has just alluded to, before I even get to Kimonyo, back in 1994, our families, we were in Kigali, which is the capital of Rwanda, for those of you guys who do not know Rwanda. And we were also being hunted, just like most people who were being hunted. And I remember we had to get in the ceiling of the house, and we'd stay there for some time, for at least maybe 10 or 12 days, things like that, before we could actually come out. And you would not believe what happens when you're hungry, when you haven't eaten anything, when you can't really go to the bathroom. And if you need to go to the bathroom, you either gotta handle yourself up in the ceilings, or quietly go down and go take care of some, take care of your number two. I know it sounds funny right now, and when I think about it, but back in the days, it wasn't funny, guys. Right where we lived, the military had came to search our house at least twice, since they were looking for our parents. And literally, we could hear him searching the house downstairs. And back then, this is how gullible Rwandese people have been or were. Just about every house in Rwanda has a ceiling, and with you could literally fit. The majority of Rwandese people live in homes. We don't have apartments, with the exception that things have changed today. So in the ceiling, unless you were like Claude, how would you call someone who would live in the ceiling? You had to be really low. No one would think of going to look into the ceiling to find you. So we went there for 2 weeks.
It's like being in a crawl space.
That's
like
right.
A little crawl space, just, like this height.
Mm-hmm. So close to 2 weeks, we literally got hungry, to the extent that our parents, they say that, instead of dying of hunger in the ceiling, we might as well just go out and just die out there. At least someone will recognize our bodies, and they can just, say that they died somewhere up in the open. And it was so crazy and was so scary, because prior to the April 1994, when everything fell apart, we literally had experienced the same horrific experience in Ruhengeri, which is now known as Musanze in the Northern District. When the RPF opened the jail, I think it was sometime in 1991, February. So we were first also to leave our homes. And this time it was a first encounter with the RPF soldier back in those days, they were literally the rebel. And since we have been taught that they are cockroaches, and I never knew what that meant, except that I just could see a cockroach inside of my head. So I'd say that, now we are finished for real. So circling back to Kigali in 1994, when now our parents, we were being chased, I thought we were going to die, because from the house that we were in, knowing that we were being chased, and we have multiple barricades on roads from Kigali, going out of Kigali by foot. No vehicles were basically going anywhere unless you were a military soldier or someone important enough to actually use a vehicle to ride. So during that time, I remember that our parents, they gather as many things as they could, as they could kid, things that were light enough to bribe with, and just share with the people on barricades. We already knew that they were looking for people, and the calculation was, if we can buy our lives fast enough to the extent that we won't be killed, then there is a chance that we may die somewhere further away, where someone could actually recognize us. So our father, he literally started. He took all of us children, and we took our way to the road. Immediately, some of the neighbors that we were with, they realized that we decided to go out. So they say, "Can we join you guys?" And we say, "Yes." The only problem, our neighbors, they were Russians. They were Russians married to the Rwandese people and a couple of other neighbors. And since a white person was just white, and they thought that the Belgian had just gone down the presidential plane, so we never knew that being together with that family was also going to be an issue. Number one, we were being chased, and number two, there was also a white family fleeing with us by foot. And so as we were walking, the first barricade, we passed by, the people knew us there, so they say, we don't want to taint our hands by killing you guys, since we already know you. So they let us go. So we kept on walking, and until we arrived in the central of Kigali, we started really getting through the more strong and really vicious barricade, where literally my first encounter of someone being chopped up by a machete, I remember, was by the barricade. So they looked at all of us, and of course, a few of the people we were with, they were literally chopped from there. Now imagine I was just a kid, and I still remember this just like I can remember what just happened yesterday. And so there is a thing that comes in your stomach. I don't know whether it's fear, but you feel like you want to use the bathroom, you're shaking, you just feel like you're dead already. And so knowing that our parents had already prepared us mentally, so I say, okay, fine, as long as they don't kill us, we're just gonna soldier on and keep on going. So I remember seeing that person falling off. I held my parents, my dad, and I was just a little kid back then, and he was already holding my sister and my brother, who were younger. So I was like, damn, this is gonna be us shortly after. So he got some money out of his pocket, and he started negotiating with the people who were there. And of course, they were busy chopping up a few people. That my dad, he gave some money, and they let us go. So, but they were like, our hands are clean anyway. You won't get past a few other barricades, forward there. So as we kept on going, the group we were with, as we were fleeing, it started shrinking. Literally every barricade that we passed by, few people were killed, and even ourselves were being threatened. But the worst kind of barricade that we arrived on, when I knew I wasn't gonna make it, it was like at least the third barricade, when now we didn't have any more money to bribe with. Everything was literally finished. So we had some sugar that we were sucking on. I think it was just like maybe a little bit of a small bag that you could just use. So they were like, we know you guys are just, you're the cockroaches. They could see you physically, and whether they were mistakenly or not, uh, they would literally tell that, get on this side and get on that side. One side was for those who were supposed to be killed. The next side was for those who were going to be basically who could leave. So the Russian families and us, they put us on this side, and automatically, my brothers, my sisters, and I, this guy, he grabbed the machete and he literally hit you by the side of the machete. So Dad had the sugar with us, and so Dad was like, I'm so sorry, we don't have anything else. Can we give you anything? So he renegotiated again as they were literally trying to kill us right then and there. So all of a sudden, he pulled out a small bag of sugar. And he was like, this is all I got left. I'm telling you guys, when your life is worth, a sugar bag, just a little sugar bag, things are really crazy. So I remember these guys were also hungry. There were no food. So they literally took the sugar. And as they took the sugar, I had already fallen down with my sister. So Dad grabbed us quickly, and as they were literally trying to scare us off, we walked, and they were like, "You won't get past further down there." And evidently, too, we had the same problem as soon as we arrived to the fifth barricade. This time, we didn't have any sugar, we didn't have any money, we literally didn't have anything to bribe them with. So then Father was like, if it happens, and so be it. So I knew that right then and there we were not going to survive. So when we arrived there, I remember we just looked, and automatically they told us to just get there. They didn't even want to negotiate. They didn't want to hear no story, no nothing, even though it didn't keep our father from speaking. So, and I remember now they got us literally. They took the machete, hit me in the back. My younger sister, when you have someone who's stronger, the machete, when they hit you with it, it's just like there's a way they used to kill cows back home. You guys will not even relate to this, but I'll let you know anyway. See, in the United States, when they're trying to butcher a cow, they put you in a machine. They get the cow and they send it to that machine, and they gently kill it. In Rwanda, because a cow is so huge, someone has to literally hit it, so that at least the first strikes is to pin down the cow. So we were hit by those first machetes to pin us down so that they can start chopping us up the same way they were chopping other people. So I remember falling down, and our father came and fell on the top of us, and he started screaming to have mercy, but they weren't having that. And guys, I was like, God, if there was any time that you could help us, would you just help us? I just said that in my head, and lo and behold, as soon as they started literally hitting us down with those baseball bat-looking ubuhiri, and so literally guns started going off, the machine gun. The bullets were so close to where we were being pinned down, and the Interahamwe, along with the soldiers, they ducked. So I was like, I don't want to die by machete. So I don't know where I got the strength from. I started running, and I was just running toward the bullet because I was like, if I can die just with a bullet, I won't get hurt. So I kept on running, not knowing where I was going. I probably ran for like 100 meters. And as I was running, the bullet just were falling. And thank God it didn't, they didn't get me. But that's what I wanted to die by. So why am I saying that to you guys? When we got through the whole havoc, it is so much to say about when you're being actually hunted on one side or the other. So we were fleeing because we were being hunted. But after the genocide also, we also got back to the same thing because of my mouth. So we arrived in the United States in 1995. And a couple years afterwards, in 2000 or so, I'd looked what was happening in Rwanda, and it hurt me to see how Rwandese people were being killed. And I was just a little bold, but I vowed that, I don't want to live like this as a Rwandan person. Because one, people were being killed from all over. A lot of Hutus, a lot of Tutsis. And since we were in the United States, we could hear them. And in 1995, the RPF had already taken power, and those deaths never stopped. When it didn't stop, so I was questioning myself, when are we going to have peace? And I was just a boy. And in 2000, I decided, you know, I'm going to do something about that myself. Again, that I was a little boy, didn't have any money nor nothing. I decided to create an alias name and made myself like an older person. So I started speaking out and I started, you know, taking some action. But then the Rwandan government started realizing that someone was against it. So those threats started with me. They literally would send some of the government officials in Washington, D.C. after me. I was just a kid. But the only thing that was saving me was that they never knew my identity. Most of my colleagues, even Claude, knew me back in the days since we were in the struggle together when he was just starting. They knew what I did, but since we were, you know, we grew up together here in Washington, it was our little secret, basically. So going forward back to Kimonyo at the National Press Club, I arrived there also. I was doing reporting. I was reporting there. And when Kimonyo was saying that also, he gave us a warning. I personally interviewed Kimonyo when he was the ambassador. And so he was like, you know, he was telling us in Kinyarwanda, you little young boys, you're hurting your country. Don't associate yourself with these Interahamwe and so on and so on. But that was going back to what Claude was saying. And Rusesabagina and those charges there, we were actually laughing about it because I remember nobody could believe that they could literally say that this is like almost some sort of clandestine investigation. They were literally being laughed at National Press Club. But the fact that we knew what he was saying in Kenya, he would speak to us in Kinyarwanda because he knew us. But he was a little bit of disappointed that we were actually speaking up, given our past history, because the government knew us, they knew our parents, and the fact that we were somehow speaking against the narrative was really not acceptable. And so I remember those two instances when Ambassador Kimonyo was really upset, actually, and but the man had a straight face. He was accusing Mr. Rusesabagina that the stories were fabricated and all of that. There are videos, actually, guys. I do believe the National Press Club has that video, but we also have that same video because I was recording it. It was laughable, but it was also sad because the same government and the same people who years back were actually saving people who were being killed by machetes and by guns, they turn around and they started selling another different kind of lie, going back to what Claude was saying. But I want to finish off just this testimony by sharing with you a testimony that I had yesterday. Literally, I was sharing this conversation with this woman. She spoke to me. She held on me for 5 hours, guys. And she said, Freeman, I've been looking for you for such a long time. Today is my time. This woman, her father was a Hutu and her mom was a Tutsi. And during the genocide, just like us, they were separated. However, because her mom was a Tutsi, the father said, listen, you guys need to go. You have to go alone, otherwise they are going to kill you, because it was expected to stay behind and basically fight. So as they were fighting, the mother took the children. They were in Butare. So they headed towards Gikongo and then Changugu and Bukavu. Now, the man was in charge of those siblings. There were 8 children, but he took just a few of them, since some of them were already killed during the genocide. So the few children that she took with her, they made it all the way to Bukavu, and they went to the refugee camp, and then the RPF soldiers came there back in 1996. And as they were destroying those camps, the mother and the children were attacked. As they were being attacked, they decided to keep on running further and further in the bushes or the forest of the Congo. So her mom, they were walking for so long that her legs started swelling. And to the point that she told her and her sibling, you know what, you guys leave me behind. I can't go any further. And she was only 13 years old. The mom, literally, they left her behind. She couldn't walk anymore. Her legs were literally shedding blood and all of that. So they cried, of course. And the mother was like, you know what, I want you to have life. Just go leave and, leave me. So while under pressure of the RPF soldiers following them, and knowingly that they were also Tutsis, she ran and she ran, and as soon as they got into safety, they decided to go back to see if their mom was still alive. When they went back, the mother was dead. She died on the road when they left her behind. And so the reason why I'm telling this story, their father had stayed in Rwanda. And when the RPF took over, they took her father and her younger brother, and they literally told them that they had to admit that her father had killed their mother. So they all knew that her mom had died on the road in the DRC forest. But because the RPF had literally forced them to agree to confess on a murder that the father had never been, has never committed. So the father and one of her brother, they were imprisoned for 17 years, guys. 17 years because of a murder they've never committed. So now she's having so much trauma because we get ready arrived to April, where you remembering those who perished during the genocide. And now she asked me, Freeman, I know my mother was never killed by my father. I cannot tell my truth. Will you guys speak my truth on my behalf? I can't go to Rwanda because I still have at least 2 of our family members in Rwanda. I'm afraid that if I speak up, they would also traumatize them. Even they might potentially kill him. She has immediate siblings that one sibling who's left. That they both came from the same belly. She has uncles and aunties on both sides. All of them, they know that her father never killed their mother. But the RPF had told their family, if they ever speak up, it's going to be on their death. Basically weaponizing the genocide, as we started in the conversation, saying, if you do not if you do not speak the narrative that we want you to speak, you too are going to be the victim, just like everyone else. And I don't want to hold the floor to myself, since this is something we're sharing. I want to give back to you, Claude, but I really want to tell you guys in America and the rest of the world, not everything you hear of Rwanda is what it is in the actuality. You have people who cannot speak because they are under strict orders that if you speak up, your family, even yourself, could potentially be subjected to literally being killed, just like that family that I just mentioned. And me personally, right now, as I'm speaking to you, while I also have families in the country, they're looking for me. They're looking for all of us because we are speaking up, but we are no longer afraid to speak the truth. They know we're speaking the truth. We're not lying, and we come right in front of you because we want to speak our truth. We want to speak what it is that we know to be true, and we want them to challenge us if there is any lie among what we are saying. And I'm wondering, and I'm asking all of you, Americans, and those of you who are listening English, when have you compromised truth over a lie? Why would you allow a lie to take root, to take hold in the entire nation, especially a nation such as Rwanda, who just experienced genocide? As children, whether we are mixed or whether we're coming from this side of an ethnicity or another side. Can't we just live just like you guys? Is that so much to ask? And I'll give back to you, Claude.
Thank you, Freeman, for your testimony. I think most people have not heard your testimony publicly. I mean, I can't pretend I haven't heard it. I've heard it multiple times. But ladies and gentlemen, the three of us that you're looking at here are accused of denying the genocide that we're testifying surviving. The three of us are accused of minimizing this genocide that we barely survived. And the three of us have one thing in common. We refuse, and we are not going to use our story to serve a perpetrator, to serve somebody that actually took a part in this genocide. And when I say this, there is evidence. I have a book here, it's old, called In Praise of Blood, written by Judy River, a Canadian journalist, investigative journalist who documented the crimes that the RPF committed. If you know the definition of genocide, the RPF and Kagame committed genocide. And we refuse to not acknowledge other people's suffering and other people's killings or call them other things. We call them what they are. That is why we are under threat. In fact, just this in the last few days, someone sent us a threat, me and Freeman, and said, you guys, I'm gonna track you down in DC. I'm willing to go to prison for killing the both of y'all. We have the threat. So this is not something that we're making up. We have documentation of all these things. You know, you saw the pictures of the ambassador, James Kimonyo. I mean, we have multiple. We can go on and on with stories of what we've dealt with, but we are not going to change our stories. We're not going to, the other thing, we have a new title in Rwanda. They call us fake survivors because we refuse to go with the official narrative of the Rwandan government on what happened in the genocide. We want to tell the complete story. A part of why we're holding this event is to write history, to make sure that it's documented. Not only that we are saying it, you can see our faces, you can see everything. When we tell it, we document it. And we just want to make sure that the world knows what actually is the reality that the Rwandan people are living with. And by the way, that these foreign countries, America, the UK, France, and others are financing this regime. We also want you to know that as a tax-paying, voting citizen, you have a voice and you can actually do something about it. We'll get into that later, but I wanted to bring it back in, Karine, into the conversation because, you know, we've talked about these threats. You know, there's this history of false charges against your father and against many other people. And we're going to talk about those, highlighting the stories of these other survivors who actually are not able to freely speak because, of course, Kizito, whom you saw sitting with Freeman, has been killed. Theo Mushahidi is in prison, serving life in prison. Aimable Karasira is in Rwanda, and they continue to tell him how to tell his story. Yvonne Idamange is also being accused of denying genocide and everything, and we'll talk about a little bit more about her story also as we go forward. And you'll get to hear from each one of these individuals anyway, in their own voices. So with that, Karine, will you speak about, before we get into that, will you speak about your dad's, the history of charges?
Yes, of course. So basically, the history of like the false charges coming from the Rwandan government have started immediately after my father refused to also go along with the Rwandan government's narrative of how the genocide took place and what happened since. After the movie Hotel Rwanda, as I mentioned earlier, after the movie was released and the government approached my father and he refused to go along with their story and their narrative, that's when the false charges started. They first tried to accuse him of a genocide denier, of a negationist, because he did not go along with them, and even ideologists. The fact is, it was very difficult for them to come to bring those accusations forward because he had just made a movie about the genocide. So trying to call a person that just literally made a movie about the genocide a genocide denier did not make any sense, and most of the people around the world noticed it. Same for the negationism and ideology story, false accusations. I mean, it's laughable because it's so wrong and false, and it's actually even minimizing what that word actually means. And afterwards, so it started off with those accusations of genocide denial and so on, and that did not work out, although they keep throwing them around at me now too, although I lost both my biological parents in the genocide. But that did not work out so successfully with them. So then they started accusing him of funding rebel groups. At one event, actually, with Ambassador Kimonyo as well, he stood up and said, Mr. Sesbegina, we have evidence of you being in South Africa, sending weapons and money to rebel groups in the Congo. And they even stated a date of those meetings, saying you were there at X date of that year. And so luckily, my father was, first of all, on the stage with the other person that he was being accused of being in South Africa with, sending money to rebel groups. But on top of that, he had his passport on him. So when Ambassador Kimonyo repeated the date, my father took out his passport and said, this man is lying to you, because you can see in my passport that I have a stamp that shows that I was actually in the United States at that moment. So I was nowhere near South Africa sending any money or weapons to rebel groups. Again, Mr. Ambassador Kimonyo was humiliated, frankly. And humiliation is actually an understatement for that kind of behavior in public, especially based on false accusations. A few years later, they start again. They continued throwing accusations, false charges, and my father was always brave and good at defending himself, even though they weren't even worthy of needing defense. But in 2010, they tried again to accuse him of funding rebel groups. And so they created the falsified Western Union receipts. But the fact is, they are so unprofessional, even in their falsification, that because they knew that my father had a home in Texas, they printed falsified Western Union receipts and said, my father is sending money to rebel groups in the Congo from Texas. But the date of the transfers that they put, my father was actually in Ireland at that moment. So try to bring these charges and try to get the Americans or the Belgian authorities to arrest him on falsified money transfer receipts. I mean, this is a trend, and it happened over and over again over the years, where they're like, oh, this guy is a genocide denier. That doesn't work. He's funding rebel groups. That doesn't work. All of those different things they tried to throw at him has escalated to terrorism. So now they know that not only is the terminology terrorism scary for anyone, really, and people are afraid of what that means and what the consequences of that, but on top of that is they know that people would back off and would not dare to defend it. And the fact is, it's also lies. It's just an escalation in a different way to try to get at him. And frankly, the accusations he got in 2010 are a copy and paste of what is facing now. Very similar to the same false accusations. It's just that now they've revamped their accusations, reworded a bit some of the things, and try to hope that this time it sticks. However, thankfully, my father documented every single one of these accusations and these events really well, and he's been able to and he's left it for us even to be able to defend him and to speak up for him as he's now being silenced. And so this is to say that the Rwandan government strategy of silencing people, silencing critics, silencing people who want to tell the story as it happens, in order to want to tell the story, the Rwandan government brings up false charges and puts it on those people and hope that they can arrest them, lock them up, and silence them forever. We've seen it in the case of many other people that we're going to talk about, but even most recently, you can talk about Diane Rwigara or Victoire Ingabire, where they were accused of false charges only to lock them up so that they don't speak again. So the idea is to silence people. So a country that calls itself a democracy, that calls itself a success story, yet if you dare to speak up, you're either killed, assassinated, or killed, disappeared, or locked up, is not a safe country, is not a democracy, and just to conclude this statement is to say that the Rwandan government has been sharing a false image with the world about what it actually is, what actually happens in this country. And this is the story, the truth that we are putting out here today, and we've been putting out for as long as we can, personally more so recently than the two of you. But the truth that we are putting out there is the truth that the Rwandan government has been working so hard for over 25 years to try to hide. And truth always comes out. So I'm happy to be sharing this discussion with you to discuss the truth.
I hope that everyone in the audience, especially those of you who are unfamiliar with Rwanda, are seeing a pattern. This is starting with just, the three of us telling our story and Corinne adding the story of her father. Now we want to shift into to continue to show you how this is actually a pattern. The genocide in Rwanda, the Rwandan genocide is used as a tool of repression inside of the country and a tool of blackmail against the international community by the RPF. By the way, the same RPF that told the international community, do not intervene. They wrote a letter on April 28th, 1994. This was merely 3 weeks into the genocide. Letter signed by Claude Dusaidi and Gerald Gahima. Gerald Gahima today lives in the US. Claude Dusaidi is dead. Gerald Gahima went on to become the Attorney General in Rwanda. The letter says, if there's an intervention, they will be shot at, and that all Tutsis who were to be killed had either been killed or had left the country. But after that, hundreds of thousands of people were killed. So this is the same RPF today that wants to tell the world that the world did not intervene during the genocide, so no one should talk, should criticize them, should hold them accountable. But in fact, we will continue. We are determined to make sure that justice is served. Eventually, the perpetrators of within the RPF must be pursued, because international justice has so far failed. But there's still a mechanism today to actually persecute them. Continue to follow the conversation that we will continue to have. We'll continue to have these type of conversations, including the things that happen in the Congo, the mapping report. And I'm grateful for HMG Studio for providing the platform for us to continue to do this. So to continue to show this pattern, we want to start with a video of this woman speaking her own words, Idamange, who has come out, taken Rwanda's social media by storm, and basically everybody is buying her message because she's talking about the things that Rwandan people want to say, but they're afraid. She's saying those things boldly. She is not mincing words, and that's what the people have an appetite for. For that reason, she's been rewarded with being called a genocide denier that she's survived. And last week, her son was kidnapped and kept away for 14 hours and returned after interventions that helped to make sure that they did not keep the son, or that made sure that they returned the son. But again, it's important that we raise our voices and continue to raise our voices, because when they accuse us of terrorism, it's because they're terrified of the truth. We must continue to tell the truth. And I want the studio to see if we can run the video of Idamange, so that we can continue to highlight this pattern. And Corinne and Freeman, you can chime in after the video.
ariko ubundi umuntu acika ku icumu rya jenoside yarangiza agapfobya jenoside ate, ariko baravuga ngo utabusya bwitumira. Biriya ni ugukinira ku muntu, babyita gucuhurira umuntu. umuntu akige ku icumu rya jenoside ariko kuko yitandukanije n'ibitavuga ukuri, kuko ashaka ukuri, kuko ashaka uburenganzira bwa rubanda nyamwinshi, kuko ashaka amahoro y'abanyarwanda, bati arapfobya jenoside. Reka mbabwire nyiraho ngaho, nimushaka muzavuga iki? Nimushaka muzabivuge mu buhe buryo? Njye nababwiye ngo nahagurutse mpagurutse, nta kizancecekesha, ntabwo nzaceceka kereka mukanohe.
Okay, so that's Mrs. Idamange. She was saying, for those of you who could hear Kinyarwanda, and we will do the best actually to queue up this message in English. She was speaking out saying, how can you survive the genocide and then turn around, become a genocide denier? And she was also saying that she is not going to speak up anymore. I mean, she's not going to basically stay silent anymore. Even if it means that they are going to kill her, she is going to speak up. So she is literally saying that publicly, unapologetic, and literally in the face of the Rwandan government. I want to remind you that nobody says something like that in Rwanda. It is literally almost like a death sentence if one was to literally speak up in Rwanda and use that kind of language. But Mrs. Idamange, a mother of 4, she spoke up, and she spoke up for the first time, spoke up literally everything that Rwandese people in the country want to say, but they are afraid of saying. I was mentioning it just a few days ago. One of her child was kidnapped. Corinne, can you guys hear me now? My apologies. I was telling the viewers that the Mrs. Idamange was speaking up, telling the world, telling the Rwandese people that how can you survive the genocide and turn around and become a genocide denier, which is one of the things she's being accused of. Not only that, she said that enough is enough. She's no longer going to be silent. She's seen evil in Rwanda. She's seen so many things happening, a lot of evil being taking place in Rwanda, and nothing is being done about it. And so she say enough is enough. Even if they want to kill her, even if she gets killed, she is not going to stop. She is going to speak the truth, and she is going to request that everyone in Rwanda becomes free, becomes liberated. And as she was saying that, just a week later, which was just a few days ago, her son was kidnapped, was literally kidnapped. Someone calls her son to get out of the compound. As soon as he arrived outside, they snatched her. Now, in Rwanda, they have a curfew at 7 p.m. So they literally called the child close to 7 p.m. As soon as the child stepped outside, the vehicle snatched her, snatched the child. The mother didn't even know that the child was outside of the compound until 15 minutes later. From her own testimony, she told us that around 7:15, she basically called out for her son, but he wasn't nowhere to be found. She decided to call him by phone. The boy didn't pick up the phone. She kept on calling and calling and calling and calling nonstop. 2 hours later, sometimes around 9:30 p.m., the son sends a message to her mother, and he tells her that he had been apprehended in the stadium. So basically, the backdrop of the stadium story. Right now in Rwanda, when you violate the curfew, they will literally take you to the stadium, and you will be fined a few thousand Rwandan francs. And if you've got the money, they let you go, and if you don't, you sleep overnight. Now, this boy is a minor. You do not take a minor in a stadium without the parents, knowing where the boy is or where the child is. So the Rwandan government kidnaps the boy. The police, in this case, didn't call the parents to inform them that, look, your son had been taken, for violating the curfew, and consequently, we have him here at the stadium. So when the boy texts the mother, it was the first time that his mother receives a text message. So immediately she called back and he refused to pick up the phone. So, most parents, you have GPS on the phone. So she went on the computer, tried to track the GPS where the boy was, because she couldn't believe that the boy was in stadium, and the fact that he was not picking the phone. So she went and checked the computer to see if she could, track the phone. And guess what? The government had already disabled the GPS. Now you would wonder, if the boy was only being charged for violating the curfew, why in the world would the police tamper with the GPS? The boy doesn't know how to disable the GPS. They disabled the GPS because these guys know what they're doing. They didn't want to be tracked. They didn't want the mother to know where the boy was, and she couldn't track him. And as you can imagine, she kept on calling the whole night long until she reached our studio, and she told us what was happening. So we helped her putting an SOS message out. Even Claude was around. We also did put out an SOS in English, but the first SOS we put out was in Kinyarwanda. And I'm telling you guys, hours later, after she threatened that if her son wasn't returned unharmed, we stayed up all night long, making calls and calling anybody that we could call to see if there could be ways about if the boy could be found unharmed. Already you can imagine, if you're losing a child, you're panicking. Most of the people who get kidnapped, they get killed. One recently who's been kidnapped, and we do not have any further details about his ways about, is one of the poet. His name is Bahati Innocent. So just like this young little boy, he also was kidnapped, but that's a story of another day. What am I saying to you guys? Mrs. Idamage is being harassed to the extent that they are willing to kidnap her whole entire family. She has barricaded herself at home. She doesn't get out of the compound because her life is being threatened. There are so many death threats about, on her every single day. You have the police, the Rwandan police, circling her compound, making sure that she doesn't get out of, she doesn't get out of the compound, all because she's simply speaking the truth. A genocide survivor who has had enough of what's happening in Rwanda. She's willing to speak up to the extent that she's willing to shed her blood so that the rest of the Rwandan citizen could actually have a decent life. And what's the reward? Getting killed, death threat, kidnapping, and so much more. So you can imagine what's happening in Rwanda. Claude, take it back again, please.
I actually want to yield it to Karine for her remarks on the case of Idamange, because I just want us to continue to demonstrate this pattern of what happens. And imagine now other people who are now considered survivors of the genocide, because this is supposed to be a privileged group, by the way.
Yeah, so I think my thoughts on Idamange, first of all, she's a very, very brave woman for doing this, knowing that the Rwandan government has no problem killing people right away. But what this shows us is that Rwandan people have suffered enough. Rwandan people have suffered enough, and enough is enough, that a woman is ready to risk her own life in order to tell them enough is enough, and to share She's done it so brilliantly by being very public and proactive, by sharing every single second of what happens to her when there's a car pulls up outside her house. She reports it. She wants all of us to follow, to be witnesses of what she's going to face, because we've seen it happen over and over again. And the Rwandan government has become expert at making people disappear and then forgotten and never spoken to of again. She's found a strategy to keep all of us in the loop of what is happening so that we can speak up for her when they come to hurt her. And look, they have already showed up to hurt her by kidnapping her son and keeping her minor son and keeping him away from her for 14 hours, I believe, or what, for the amount of enough of a time to be worried as a parent. And so what this tells us is that Rwandan people have suffered enough, and enough is enough. So this woman has stood up. And sadly, and this is another point that I cannot quite wrap my head around, is that these are people that the Rwandan government should be putting up on the pedestal. These are people who are brave, who are courageous, who are pointing out what is wrong with the system and asking for them to fix it. She's begging for help. She's asking for help. Yet the response of the government, rather than help her, rather than try to find solutions for her problems, rather than bring her around the table and say, look, you look like you have some great ideas to fix the issues that we have been unable to fix. Instead, they're threatening her and stealing her son in order to silence her and make her and make her disappear, and make her stop from speaking that truth, from fixing those problems. So their opposite reaction, they should be doing the complete opposite. They should be giving her a mic and saying, tell us the answers. We did wrong, so what can we do right? Right? And instead, they're silencing her, they're threatening her, and they're making her afraid. But I commend this woman for having the bravery, the strength, and the courage to share what her story, to share the struggle of the Rwandan people, and asking and bringing all of us with her in this journey, so that we can speak up for her when they come to hurt her, as they have hurt so many others.
And I think, Karine, just to add to what you're saying, by bringing us into the conversation, those of us who live outside of the country have an obligation to share these stories in the languages that the rest of the world understands. It's nice for us to have all of these echo chamber conversations in the Kinyarwanda language, but that is not going to get anywhere. The whole global community must get to know what's actually happening, because what the regime in Rwanda banks on, when they kill and torture Rwandans, when they massacre and rape massively the Congolese people, is that it happens in the dark. And we must continue to shine a light on it. And we all have a platform. We can use our platforms to make sure that these voices are heard. Just so that we continue to show the pattern. We want to show a story of another survivor that we're about to hear from also. His name is Aimable Karasira. He is an artist, he's a singer, he's a musician. He's also a university professor who was recently fired for making statements the government doesn't like on his own YouTube channel. In Kinyarwanda, unfortunately, a lot of these statements. But imagine somebody being fired from a job for having an opinion, somebody losing their job for saying something that the government does not like. He's constantly harassed. He continues to be called into the Rwanda Investigative Bureau office, which is known as the RIB. And they tell him how to tell his story. This is a person who lost so many family members in the genocide. And on top of that, after the genocide, the RPF killed most of who remained in his family. But they want him to erase that part of the story. And in his own words, he actually says it in this video. Studio, if you're ready to run the video, please, love to hear from Karasira himself.
ndanahavuga harazwi n'ahantu bita irwaniro imwendo mu rugerero bene wacu ba data wacu ba masenge bande bose abana twari tuvinda imwe babyara banjye n'ahantu hanazwi cyane uko tujya kuhibuka buri gihe mu kwa gatanu gutyo hapfuye imbaga y'abantu barapfuye benshi bazira ubwoko nta kindi kintu bazira batazira ngo wenda n'ibyitso bya FPR batazira ngo hari abasore n'abana urubyiruko bohereje mu nkotanyi bari abantu b'abahinzi borozi bibereye aho. Ku giti cyanjye rero jenoside rwose ndayemera 100%. Biriya rero bavuga ngewe n'ibyo ribu yambwiye byari verisiyo, bo bampaye icyo bita verisiyo rega, ni nka verisiyo yitwa ko ari verisiyo iri ofisiyeri, verisiyo ya Kigali, verisiyo oya ndashaka kwikuvisha verisiyo ya Kigali ntabwo nyuranya nayo cyane, ivuga yuko jenoside yabaye, nanjye nkabyemera ko jenoside yambayeho, bikajya ku ruhande gatoya iyo mvuze ko hari ibindi byaha, aho niho haba ibibazo, nicyo kibazo cyonyine, kandi icyo nakyemereye ribu ko ntazongera kuzajya nkivuga. Ni akabazo k'ibyaha gusa bindi byakozwe. Yes.
Hanyuma niba ubyemera ukanavuga uti mu jenoside yakorewe abatutsi yakorewe nanjye ndimo.
Yes.
Iyo uvuze no kwipfobya ukanayihakana ubyakira ute?
Yewe mbona ari bya bindi bya wa mugani wa Kizito ngo hatakwa nyir'ubukozwemo nyir'ubuteranwe n'akeba kinumira. Ye nibaza Tom Ndahiro wenda aho ashingira angerekaho ingengabitekerezo ya jenoside cyangwa angerekaho kuba umujenosideri cyangwa upfobya jenoside. Iyo ndebye ubuzima nanyuzemo n'ubu nkiba amahubwo yewe nta nubwo bwarangiye, kuko hari abandi bageze aho babona imfashanyo bagera ububaka umuryango, ngewe ndacyafite umuryango wa Nyakamwe. Ibikomere bya jenoside ngewe mbibamo buri gihe, ni nkaho buri gihe umbwira nkibuka ko turi mu kwa 4 cyangwa mu kwa 5 cyangwa mu kwa 6 ku'94, nta kintu cyamungiye mu maso ngo kibinyibagize cyane ngo ngimbe nabyibagirwa. Ni ubuzima mporamo bufite icyo bupfana n'ubwo ngubwo. Nuvuga ngo rero Tom Ndahiro namufata nk'umushinyaguzi. Iyo Tom Ndahiro afata abantu, kandi sijye jyenyine n'abandi bose b'abacika cumu, ukumva ngo uko bavuze bati turanenga yuko uyu muhanda utagenze neza, gira inka itatanzwe neza, kuko gusa bavuze ibintu byo kunenga ngo bikosoke, babyita denominateur commun, icyita rusange, akahita bashyira ku cyita rusange cyitwa iki, ingengabitekerezo, gupfobya jenoside. Ibyo ni icyita rusange yakoze cyarangije gukorwa, agenda ashyiraho amayirema yishakiye bitewe n'amayirema yanenze ngo ibintu bikosoke, amayirema yanatanavuga rumwe na leta, ukubona we ari.
To summarize the remarks of Aimable Karasira, that's the person I was just speaking about, who is the professor in Rwanda. The first part of what he said was he talked about many dozens of his family members being killed, cousins, aunties, and various people. He named the location and everything. Then he shifts forward on what's happened with Rwandan authorities, with the RIB, Rwanda Investigation Bureau. You know, what have they told him? And he says, you know, there is an official version of the genocide that they want me to uphold. They just don't want me to talk about other crimes. And he's speaking in code, so he doesn't directly say the genocide against Hutu people committed by the RPF or other crimes and massacres and these kidnappings and things like that that the RPF has committed, which is the government in place. Then he shifts forward and they ask him about government propagandists who continue to harass him and call him a genocide denier and everything. And he says, I survived this genocide, just like Mrs. Idamange. And they're accusing me of denying the same genocide. The propagandist, the specific one, or at least one of them that he talks about is Tom Ndahiro, whom also Freeman, you have met. We ran into him in DC when we were doing an event on the UN mapping report where he came to harass us.
With the Capitol Hill.
That's right, with staff members from the government. I think there was like 10 or 15 of them.
Yeah.
And, you know, he came basically making threats, and he was speaking in Kinyarwanda. Same thing that Ambassador Kimonyo did at that meeting at the press club. You know, the thing that he said to me was, what genocide did you survive? And I told him I survived the Rwandan genocide. And then he continues to insist which genocide. And I was still sitting at the podium. It was right after the meeting. So I got up and I faced him and said in English, what's your question? Say it loudly and make sure everybody can hear you. So there was a bunch of people from the press and they started pointing mics at him, and he turned around and ran out of the room. He pretty much just almost trampled over, you know, the crowd of people that was in there. they are so afraid of the truth, but they will use this charge of genocide denial, this charge of minimizing the genocide ideology against anybody for anything. One of the things that Aimable Karasira said was, if you say that a road is badly built, they will accuse you of denying the genocide. There's nothing, like, a road has nothing to do with genocide. That's the point that he was making. And so this is what the government of Rwanda does. And this is, again, we continue to show the pattern from ourselves, our own stories, from the story of Karim's father, and now to the story of Idamange, and now the harassment that Karasira has been undergoing. In fact, Karasira has lost his job because of these comments he's made on YouTube. So I just want to turn it back over to my colleagues here so we can continue and chime in on your thoughts on Karasira himself. We've got 2 more to go to continue showing this pattern.
Yeah, so I'd say Karasira is another brave one, and what we're seeing here is that people are finally standing up even within the country. Like the fact that us being outside are in a position that we can speak because we have a little more security, although we fear for our lives too, given the long arms of this dictatorship. The fact that people within the country are now losing that fear and standing up and speaking up and telling their truth. What's funny with Karasira, and I think even braver, is that he was brought into the RIB. He was asked to stop speaking about the genocide, and then he came out and he said, they asked me to stop speaking about this, and then he spoke about it. So that's genius if you think about it. So maybe they didn't tell him how he wasn't able to do this, but he was able to find a way around it and still continue his message. And so he's another brilliant one. But this goes to show that, and so just to add on another point on Karasira is that now we're hearing of people saying that Rwanda is thinking of closing down YouTube. What we've figured out, or making YouTube inaccessible, what we've figured out is that Rwanda cannot control big tech. So this is where we all need to be. They can't control Twitter, they can't control YouTube, they can't control Facebook. This big tech are things that they need to, that we can all use to share this message. And Karasira has been doing it rightly so on the platform. So have Idamange and all the other people who are going onto platform to share their stories. And perhaps this is a moment to encourage everyone else to be like, keep it public, go on this platform, because they cannot control you here. Perhaps they can control you in your home and in Rwanda, but once you put it on YouTube, the message is out, and the Rwandan government cannot do anything about it. So this is another brave one, and I hope that many more will follow to start speaking their truth and continue to find sneaky ways to go around the boundaries set by this corrupt system.
Thanks, Corinne. I literally, real quick, also want to add something. Karasira, as one of those. He's extremely smart, but when you see how you get belittled by the government, they remind you that basically they own you. Anything you can use, you can say, without a stamp of approval within Rwanda, especially if it is a narrative that is not pre-approved. You are subject to anything and everything on the table, including getting fired, being kidnapped, and killed if necessary, just to silence you or just to make you disappear altogether. I also want to mention something that's really important. Right now, most of the people who work for the government of Rwanda, who are actually accusing people openly of being genocide denials or having some sort of ideology or negationists, these are the people who were not in Rwanda. And some of them, we have heard stories that they actually may have been participating in some crime themselves. So you have someone who portrays himself as an expert in genocide, yet he's never been there. the studies and the things that he's speaking of, some of which is completely fabrication. He's accusing people, those who are true survivors of genocide, such as Madame Idamange. Look, Corinne Kanimba, these people have literally been in the genocide. I've been in the genocide. That guy that Claude was mentioning, Tom the Hero, he's very notorious in dissecting people. He uses hate speeches against people. He's been recently targeting and literally using all kinds of hate speech against Madame Idamange and Karasira Emab, even Claude himself and Paul Rusesabagina. He literally doesn't have mercy for nobody. And I just understand why Rwanda, they know that the man has no clue. He's completely telling lies, fabrication, but they are literally blessing everything that he's saying at the expense of our lives, at the expense of the reputation of an actual government by the people that's being hijacked by a small group of people. So I literally want to say that it is so it's so disappointing. It literally just hurt me personally. It hurts me when I see how normally we hear of words like a government by the people and of the people. But when you see people like Karasila Emab, Miss Idamange, Paul Rusesabagina, and those who are being actually mistreated, brutalized, and just killed, disappeared. In Rwanda, up in the open, there's no sugarcoating about it. As long as you miss the red mark, the red line, as the president of Rwanda usually says, you got to go. And they don't sugarcoat about it. They take action up in the open. That's just the Rwanda that you guys are never told. And I think we're getting sick and tired as sons of Rwanda and sons of these United States to just be in the middle all the time. We are being targeted day in and day out, yet we still love these two countries. Why can't we just have a normal life? I mean, that's all we're asking. Is that so much to ask? Claude, I would love for you to speak a little bit of Kizito, because he's one of my one of the brothers that I really love. And as you see, I have him here today because what happened to him has been one of those sickening things in my stomach. And actually, that was the point. That was the day I felt like all of us, we are expendable. When he died and we were told that he committed suicide, ladies and gentlemen, we know that at least if you're going to put a lie like that, have some sort of evidence that backs it. From the information that we have had, the cell that they claim that he took his life from, it's a little teeny cell, and it does not have some sort of bar where you can take a sheet and you hang yourself in, and you wonder, how can you literally hang yourself in a little small room that doesn't have a means for you to hang yourself? In addition to that, take your eyes out of yourself and get some of your body part chopped up. How do you commit suicide and still manage to take all those things taking place? So when the government is telling a lie up in the open, and they're not afraid of speaking that lie, telling that lie, and ensuring that anybody who goes against that narrative is killed, is disappeared, or just harassed for a lifetime, you know, that's actually going beyond that red line that the president of Rwanda usually speaks of. I'm so disgusted. This is the week that we remember Kizito Mihigo. And for those of you who do not know Kizito Mihigo, he was one of the acclaimed Rwandan singer, songwriter, producers. He's done so much work for the country. Not only that, he also wrote the national anthem that we're using today in Rwanda. But he made one mistake, according to the government. He came up with a song that actually unifies the people, both the Tutsis and the Hutus, a song that speaks of a dignified death. There's no such a death as just a Hutu only death or a Tutsi death only. Death is death. Today in Rwanda, only one side is actually remembered. You are not allowed to remember your side if you are a Hutu, one of the ethnicities, or if you're mixed. You cannot remember your own people. And you wonder, how can you have a reconciliation when one side of a tribe is not allowed to even remember their own kind? You are not allowed to bury your loved one, in some cases, as a Hutu. And you wonder, why could that be? I don't want to be associated with a group of people who actually is cherry picking all of us. As long as we are outside of the narrative of their choosing, anything and everything goes. So Kizito Mihigo comes out with a song called Egisobanro Chulufu, which also translates in English the meaning of death. As soon as that song came out, and I encourage all of you guys to go on YouTube and listen to it. I do believe there is a translation in English and a couple of other languages. Listen to the words. He said nothing outside of something anybody all over the world can easily say, just because you have a heart that feels. And today, as I give it back to my colleagues here, I want you guys to just remember that what's happening in Rwanda, it is happening in the eyes of an international audience. Back in 1994, most of you said you never knew of what was happening in Rwanda, minding you that the war started in 1990. 1994 was just the climax of the killings of which were taking place back in Rwanda. We still have killings happening even today, but there is no warfare within the country. How can you explain that? But the international community, the donors, all these donors, country to Rwanda, you know all these things happening. You have your embassies, you have people who collect information within the country, but you literally do not take steps to speak against it openly. And we are just asking, please help Rwandese people to speak up against all these heinous things taking place in Rwanda. We have all kinds of atrocities taking place every single day in Rwanda. We can sit here hours and hours and hours and give you case by case by case by case, but this time, for the first time ever, we're getting evidence on video, caught on tape, caught on pictures. So we can't make it up. We can just hit play and you can see these things taking place in the open. And this is how bad it is. And most of it is on YouTube, it's on WhatsApp, it's on Signal and Telegram. If you're looking for it, you can find it. With that in mind, I want to hand it back to my colleagues, Claude or Corinne, chime in as well, please.
I mean, I think you pretty much said it all about Kizito. The only thing I would like to add real quick is long time Kizito was a favorite of the RPF because of, and this is, I learned this from actually learning about him. I did not know about Kizito until they arrested him, until I saw him in handcuffs with cops and the press, microphones, and no lawyer. That I was like, there's something wrong here. You know, I kept seeing these messages about Kizito Mihigo. It's like, who is this guy? But then when I saw the picture, I was like, no, something is wrong here. And I started following the story. So that's how I was introduced to Kizito Mihigo. When I saw him at that time, he had actually been disappeared. So he was also kidnapped, disappeared for over a week, tortured, and he was tortured multiple times. And then he was imprisoned on trumped up charges. He was forced to confess. This is another thing that the Rwandan government likes to do, is to make people make false confessions and also go to trials and give false testimony. And so, they fabricate evidence. Like Karine talked about those Western Union documents. Now I'm thinking to myself whether they went, the few $100 statements that they showed at that meeting, Freeman, if those were also fake. The cheap wars, right? And then now with Kizito, after, the trumped up charges, he served 4 years in prison. Then they pardoned him, released him. And I remember when they released him, people were celebrating, and I wrote an article saying it's not time to celebrate. And I said, Kagame should be apologizing to Rwandan people for the way he's treated Rwandans. And I was writing about Kizito Mihigo and Victoire Ingabire, and a Rwandan politician who was also released at the same time as Kizito. Less than a year and a half later, he was rearrested and killed in prison, and they tried to lie to the world that he committed suicide. Before bringing Karine for your comments, I want you to, if you would play the video about Kizito's death, and we can hear his own voice talking about the torture that he underwent during the time that he really suffered at the hands of this government of Rwanda, who say that they stopped the genocide, which Kizito lost his father in that genocide, but now they took his life. And they wanted him to tell the story, the official narrative of the genocide, and leave out the crimes and the genocide committed by the RPF themselves. So, studio, do we have the video queued up?
Yes.
Par la directrice de cabinet du président, et le rendez-vous a eu lieu dans les bureaux du président du Sénat. L'actuel président du Sénat, à l'époque, il était vice-président du Sénat. Tous les deux m'ont dit que le président n'avait pas aimé ma chanson et que je devais lui demander pardon dans une lettre. La directrice de cabinet et le vice-président du Sénat m'ont dit que si je ne faisais pas ce qu'il m'avait dit, j'étais mort.
Before trial, he was brought before journalists he had with a member of an opposition group who allegedly took up arms against the government.
J'étais allongé par terre et on me frappait sur les fesses. Le commissaire adjoint de la police est venu me voir et m'a dit que si je continue à demander pardon et à plaider coupable dans tout le reste de mon parcours, c'est-à-dire en fait dans le procès, et que les choses allaient devenir faciles. Que si je plaide non coupable et que je cherche à dénoncer les injustices qui m'avaient été commises, eh bien, on allait me donner la perpétuité et j'allais mourir en prison.
Mihigo was released in 2018, but remained under surveillance. President Kagame, recently in London for an Africa investment conference, denies that people are beaten or tortured in Rwanda's prisons. The British government has long given him the benefit of the doubt. He'll be hoping that before they hold their heads of government meeting in Kigali in June, Commonwealth leaders will forget the gospel singer who died in custody.
Another person who tells the truth and is accused of terrorism. And this is a gospel singer. I don't know if anybody's ever heard of a gospel singer, committing terror acts. The other thing is Kizito Mihigo was in prison for 4 years, did not commit suicide while he was in prison for 4 years. He was out of prison for almost a year and a half, did not commit suicide. And then all of a sudden, within 4 days of being arrested prior to his death, they claimed that he committed suicide. So it's a big lie. They actually killed him. They assassinated him. And anybody that pretends otherwise is lying to the world. But we're here to set the record straight. Karine, I want to turn it over to you.
Yeah, I think it's Kizito's story is tragic, and it should be. I think it should not only everything that we discuss should get to people's hearts, but if anybody's story has to just the power to get to everyone's hearts as quick at the same rate as Kizito. He was a symbol of peace. Can you imagine the idea of silencing and killing somebody who has reconciliation and whose message has always been about peace and you?
We are having trouble with Karin's audio. So while we work on that.
Can you hear me?
Yes, Karin, go ahead.
Yeah, sorry. So I was saying, so it's crazy that they would decide to make a person who's a symbol of peace to kill a person who's symbolizing people together. And in the case of my father, for instance, when part of his indictment, they are claiming that he confessed to some crimes when they held him in the first few days of his arrival in Rwanda. He was tortured. He was taken in an unknown place and held tied up for 3 days by his legs, his hands, and blindfolded, and he was tortured and apparently confessed to something. But this was torture, confessing through torture, which most of the time means it's not true. You're being forced to say something against your will in order to stop that pain that is being inflicted onto you. This is what the Rwandan government does. In order to vilify you and make people dislike you, they make you confess to things you did not commit and try to use them against you in order to silence you and lock you up forever. Thankfully, Kizito's message of peace continued to spread. People continue to remember him for who he is and what he wanted, the message he wanted to share with the world. And we will continue today, and we'll continue to honor his life and honor the legacy that he has left for every single one of us. And the one added part that I would say, which is similar to the attention that Rwanda is also getting in the present day in the case of my father. The fact is, it is very hard to look inside a dictatorship. History has shown this over and over again. It is hard to be able to look inside a dictatorship and see what's happening and be able to pinpoint it. The attention that that Rwanda is having because of the kidnap my father is an opportunity for us to continue to look into this dictatorship. Now that people are looking into it, we just heard the European Union signing a resolution to condemn Rwanda for all this abuse, because of the case that was brought forward for Paul Rusesabagina. This is an opportunity to look inside the dictatorship that has for long been misleading the people around the world. And Kizito was another symbol of that. And it's so unfortunate that there are so many people who have fallen victim of this government. And the most important lesson that we should get from him is not only to continue to share this message of peace and reconciliation, as we need to be able to have this dialogue in order to heal the Rwandan people, but most importantly, speak about his journey, who he was, what happened to him, and the reason why he was killed and silenced, because that is what dictatorship means, and that is the kind of truth that we need to have in order to end it.
Agreed. I think in order to actually have reconciliation and to realize, Kizito's dream, truth is an absolute must. We must tell all the stories in their entirety and set and write history the way it happened. Number two, justice is another must. There is no reconciliation. There is no. It sounds nice, but that's like trying to take a shower with your clothes on. If you do not tell the truth first, and you do not seek justice first, try taking a shower with your clothes on and see if you can wash off everything dirty that you have. Or trying to cleanse a wound or clean a wound and treat it when you have it covered up with clothes. That's not going to happen. So truth and justice are a must. And Freeman, before we move on to the next person, to wrap this up with the last genocide survivor that we want to highlight today. I wanted to see if you have any remarks, additional remarks.
Currently, for me right now, it's the first time that I actually spend this long talking about some, Rwanda's tragic genocide and the mixture, and feeling like we on display are trying to defend ourselves. Oftentimes I lose my voice, and so do excuse me when you feel me choking a little bit. But I just want you guys to feel for our brothers and sisters back in Rwanda, those who are being chased for the things that they've never committed, those who are under constant threat. Idamange, Mrs. Idamange, Karasila Imab, the other person I was gonna mention that we get ready to speak to next, Paul Rusesabagina, the poet who just got lost, Bahati. These are just a few people you're hearing of, because we actually taking some time to speak out on their behalf. But there are thousands and thousands and thousands of voices who are currently voiceless. They are perishing left and right for little trump-up charges, if you're lucky. But oftentimes you just get silenced, or you just get, you just disappear. And it's not okay. It is not okay. In 2021, a small country as Rwanda, we parade ourselves as the Singapore of Africa. We invite tourism. We literally put forward the very best of Rwanda. But you would not know some of the most horrific stories taking place right now. And one of them that I want to just mention briefly before I give it back to you, Claude. Most of you guys from all over the world, you are constantly invited to come and go take the safari in Rwanda, go to the national park, go to the volcanoes, and so on. But in Kigali, there is a place called Banyahe. It's a code name. The official name is Kangando. It is literally maybe a couple miles away from the most luxurious hotels that we have within the capital, Kigali. So you who are just visiting Rwanda, from the airport to the hotel, everything is glamorous. When I say glamorous, you would not see any spotless. Everything is spotless. It is very difficult for you to see a stain somewhere that it doesn't belong. But if you do on your own venture outside of the predetermined path that you must go through, you will see people who are suffering. This notorious place called Banyahe, people are literally homeless. Not that they were poor, but the government has literally destroyed their homes. Now they're on the street. People are getting raped. We're talking about women, children, sons and daughters, with no exceptions.
By soldiers, not just by name.
That's correct. By soldiers.
Did it in the Congo.
Yes, indeed. Oh, thank you for even reminding me that. So these are the things taking place right now under the hood with the blessings of the government. Again, I don't want you guys to believe me, to believe Claude, or even Karine. It's on YouTube. It is literally on YouTube. That's how bad it's becoming. You see a mother speaking out how she got raped while her husband was watching, while her sons and daughters were watching. And in some cases, a daughter getting raped and the mother getting raped, and they make the husband watch. I mean, guys, I don't know whether we human beings anymore, or whether this is just pure evil. This is taking place today in Rwanda. And you tourists coming home in Rwanda, you're being showed every other spot that is spotless, but you will never get to know some of these things taking place. And I just want to appeal to you, just for once, even though life continues. But there are those voices who are literally voiceless. We can't speak on their behalf. We don't have the capacity right now, even though we have vowed to do that. We also had to say, even if you kill us, it's not going to stop us. That's how far we are willing to go, because this is not acceptable. In 2021, in the United States, I can sleep a deep sleep like a baby without having to worry about someone coming at home, terrorizing me. Why is it so much to ask for a fellow Rwandans who's over there minding their own business? Why can't they just have that sleep, decent sleep? Why can't they just live in their own little pothole house? Just the simple things that you and I don't think about, over there, they no longer have it. And we are just asking, can we have a leadership that doesn't terrorize its people? Back to you, Claude.
Thank you, Freeman. I wanted to just add a couple of things on Kizito. Let's not poo-poo his legacy by talking about all of the beautiful and great things he did for the first 32 years of his life and erase the suffering that he suffered for the last 6 years of his life. The reason why we talk about Kizito so much, he's a symbol of what Rwandans have gone through. He happens to be a very talented musician, well-known person. There's so many other people unknown that is happening to, and we are doing an injustice both to Kizito and to the rest of the suffering masses by erasing the suffering and poo-pooing his legacy by pretty much basically refusing and intentionally doing things showing that, oh, you know, Kizito did all these things, but what happened to him? Why is he not here when we're talking about him, when he should be speaking for himself? And I do think that even though Kizito sang the song, I think what Karasira and Idamange are doing is amazing, that they are speaking and speaking loudly while they're alive. The Kizito audios were released after his death. I love the fact that, for example, Karasira comes out and says, oh, you know, the Rib told me not to talk about the genocide, you know, and Damange knows to speak up. You know, speaking up without mincing words is going to help, you know, those who are speaking up. And I just want to encourage everybody to do the same. So the last person that we would like to highlight, his name is Deo Mushaidi. We don't actually have a video, but we have a book cover. Deo Mushaidi emerged in the, he got on the radar of the RPF hit list or kidnap list. By the way, he was also kidnapped from Tanzania through Burundi and brought to Rwanda, went through a sham trial, and now he's serving life in prison. Deo Mushaidi survived the genocide. He lost so many members of his family, but he refused to live the lie. He refused to adhere to simply just the official narrative. In the studio, if you could display the book cover by a French, Cameroonian writer, he writes in French. His name is Charles Onana. Charles Onana wrote a book. Everybody knows it as the Onana book, but look at the top right-hand corner, who co-wrote the book with him. It was Deo Mushaidi. Deo Mushaidi provided the testimony that was put in that book. At the very top, right below Charles Onana, the name that's right there is Deo Mushaidi. Most people do not know this fact. This book came out in the early 2000s. So the years that me and Freeman were dealing with these embassy people. And so he was for pursuit, and they eventually got him, and they accused him of terrorism. So you see the pattern. Go all the way back from the beginning where we started, all the way to where we are now. Everybody's accused of terrorism. They're accused of being a part of like these armed groups, and now he's serving life in prison. I think he's one of the bravest Rwandans. I think it's amazing that he was so early on was unwilling to stick to the lie. And there is I saw a meme not long ago saying that he refused to be stupid. And there's based on that meme. The meme says stupidity, knowing the truth and still believing the lie. Moshaidi refused to be stupid. And for refusing to be stupid, he is serving life in prison. And the more we speak up and continue to raise awareness on what's happening to people like Moshaidi, what's happened to people like Moshaidi, the sooner this dictatorship will end and the people like Moshaidi will be released and they can live free and tell the truth. I don't even call it their truth because there's nobody's truth. There is one truth. If it rains today, it's rained today. You may not know, but eventually you'll find out. And I just know that the more we continue to set the record straight, the more people like Moshaidi will be released. And so I don't want to take too long. I want to turn it over to you, Karine and Freeman.
Yeah, I'd say Dave Moshaidi as well, and all the other people that we know are in prison today are people who are being silenced for telling the truth. Not only is it because they're telling the truth, but also they're exposing a truth that is highlighting the crimes of the current government. It's truth that this government wants to hide, to suppress, to push as far down and far away and cover up as much as possible and continue to lie to the international community that this truth does not exist because they're responsible for very, very evil and terrible things. They have put the Rwandan people in Rwanda and abroad, they have inflicted a lot of pain on the people. And the people who are gaining the courage to speak up about the infliction of pain are those people that are being silenced, imprisoned, and told not to speak any longer. So not only are they being silenced for just speaking the truth, but they're speaking truth that is exposing what the government, the current government, is responsible of doing. And again, this man is a hero. Dio Moshaidi is a hero. He's a patriot. He's a man who actually loves and cares about his country because he had the courage to not only speak the truth, expose it, but also is serving a life sentence now because he loves his country so much. And this, again, it is indicative of where we're headed in the fact that more and more people will be standing up, and who knows, maybe they'll try to lock us all up in the jail at some point and cut all our hair off, or heads. That too, they do that too. But the fact is, I think this is telling that it started with the very few who dared to speak, who dared to share this truth, and now there's so many of us. And then soon enough, they won't be able to control people from speaking the truth and asking for a better life for themselves and for all of Rwandans.
Thank you so much, Karine. I wish I was saying that for real, because I felt like I was just in your head and you were in my head what I wanted to say about Deo Moshaidi. But I also want to say that I think every single one of us, we are human beings before I'm a citizen of Rwanda or a citizen of the United States, before I'm a Hutu or before I'm a Tutsi. I am a human being first. Oftentimes, we do forget that humanity, it's one of the shared values we have as people living on this planet. Anytime you dehumanize a person and you turn them into an animal, some sort of like valueless object, then anything goes. In Rwanda, unfortunately, and I hate to be the one speaking of this, but we have experienced dehumanization in my lifetime. In 1990, I was just a little boy, just playing. I didn't know who I was. I didn't even know that we had tribes in Rwanda. That's how messed up it was. I never knew anything about tribes in Rwanda before the war. I first was introduced to tribes or tribal issues back in 1991. Even with that, it was at home, we've never spoken of things like that. But then in 1994, I realized that literally when you belong to this tribe, you are just a target. Not because you've killed someone, not because you're a betrayer to the government or whatever. It's because someone says you were born there. I never chose to be born from my parents. Corinne never chose to have been born from her parents. Claude and so many others today who are being persecuted, they never selected, they never chose whose family we wanted to be born in. We are human beings today. So Deo Mushairi chose to be a human being. He chose to speak on behalf of another human being, whether it was a Rwandan of the Hutu ethnicity background or a Tutsi ethnicity background. Wrong was wrong to him. And the fact that he was up and running, fighting against all of these when we were just little boy saying enough is enough, but we had no idea what the hell we're gonna be doing. This man was already fighting with the system. Imagine 2000, we were literally still in the teenager years. You couldn't literally do anything with your own aims. We had to fake our own aims to do things that we have done. But our hearts told us that it was just wrong. But most of our parents or those who could do something about it, they could not take action. But Deo Mushairi took action. And the reward was what? Life in prison today. When Corinne is saying that soon enough they would love to just get us all up in the jail and just cut off our heads, we have death threats all the time. Literally, we have death threats. And nowadays, it's so much of it that we don't even care. I was born. Some days I'm going to die. I can just literally step outside of the studio right now and trip outside and I can just die. Or someone can just come in and, and put a gun on top of my head. Or mysteriously, I can find some sheets and I can, commit suicide, allegedly. So when you see all these things taking place, we are being dehumanized in 2021. We just want that to be stopped. Why can't Deo Mushairi have a decent life? His family enjoy a decent life. The only one crime he's committed is to speak up. The only one crime we are committing right now, we are speaking up. We are only speaking up right now. And the reward is what? Threats. All of us. You don't have to be a Tutsi to be threatened. You don't have to be a Hutu to be threatened. You no longer have to be a Twa, which is another third group of Rwandese ethnic group that you never heard of. You don't have to be any of that. You just have to be in the middle of the interest of the smallest group of criminals who's taken over the country. I'm not apologizing at all to speak the truth. I know we can, someday our lives can just perish because of that, but who cares? In any case, I want to plead that let's circle back, let's dial back and see some of these people rotting in jail, like Deo Mushairi, and speak on their behalf. Back to you, Corinne.
No, I think you said it. You said it all very well, and I hope that one day we'll see this man out of jail, and I think we should all continue to advocate for this. And I'm here to talk about my father and the injustice that he's facing. But like we've seen, he's not the only one. all these people need advocacy. All these people need all of us to be speaking for them because they have been silenced. And Deo Mushahidi is one of the first to have been silenced, and who have been imprisoned by this government. And it is each and every single one of our responsibilities to speak up.
I wanted to highlight additional bravery from Deo Mushahidi. Big difference between him and Kizito, for example. Kizito was tortured and made to confess, and he agreed, as you guys saw on the audios that he released. Mushahidi refused, and for that he's serving life in prison. Mushahidi has refused to confess to crimes he did not commit. And I think that's bravery. And I think eventually, as we all continue to speak up and expose these injustices and expose this regime that banks on doing everything in the dark, shining a light on what happens, it's going to, we are going to see Deo Mushahidi out of prison. One day that's going to happen. Freeman spoke about being dehumanized. That is still happening today. It's done not only by the regime, but supporters of the regime. Those of us right here, the three of us right now that you're seeing, because we refuse to toe the line and to skirt the truth and tell the lies that the government wants or the supporters of the government want, they smear us. They want to paint us as the extremists because we say, no, truth is not negotiable. No, justice is not negotiable. No, we are not going to bastardize and poo-poo the legacy of Kizito. No, we are not going to tell a lie about what's happening to Karasira. No, we are not going to hide what's happening to Idamange. No, we are not going to back down from any of these threats that they bring us. We are not going to stop speaking about Mushahidi, and we're not going to stop speaking about the injustices of the thousands and millions of Rwandans and Congolese. We are painted as extremists. We are painted as hateful. Those of us who want peace, those of us who advocate for truth, for justice, for the end of massive rapes, are painted as the extremists. And so I just want you to be careful, as Malcolm X said once, if we're not careful, we will find ourselves loving the oppressors and hating the oppressed. And it's Black History Month, so I love the fact that we can quote Malcolm X. But I also want to use this analogy about Kagame and the leadership in Rwanda. During slavery, the slave trade, the Europeans were taking Africans, kidnap, abduction, and sometimes paying for them, and taking them to the Americas. We were the resources. Today, what's happening on the continent of Africa is also a resource war. At the time during slavery, there were Africans who were trading other Africans and selling them into slavery. Today, what we have with the Kagames and the Musevenis and the Kabilas is the same exact thing as the Africans selling other Africans into slavery. And it's not only that, they play the game so well. I mean, we barely just recently, 6 months after the kidnapping of Paul Rusesabagina, who is a European citizen, got a statement condemning the kidnapping of Paul Rusesabagina. And we didn't even get it from the country that he's a citizen of. We got it from the European Union. We're still waiting on Belgium to make a statement. And so all that to say, everybody that's watching this, you are powerful. You have social media. Use it to highlight these cases, to tell the truth, to continue to tell the truth. If they call you an extremist, that's a very small price to pay. If they curse you out, it's a really small price to pay. Whatever anybody does, whatever anybody thinks that you are, as long as you're doing the right thing, keep it up and continue to add your voices to the Kizitos and the Deo Mushahidis, the Karasiras, the Itamanges, our voices, the Paul Rusesabagina voices. But to wrap this up, for me, and then turn it over to my colleagues. for somebody like Kagame and his government, the RPF, to accuse anybody of terrorism is like the KKK or Osama bin Laden accusing Martin Luther King of terrorism. For somebody like Kagame and the RPF who have committed genocide to accuse somebody of having genocide ideology is like the Nazis accusing somebody of having genocide ideology. And that is flipping the truth on its head. And the world must know the real face of Kagame, the real face of the RPF. We are removing the darkness. I'm grateful for HMG Studio and other platforms that have made their platforms available for us to continue to shine this light on these atrocities. And I want to turn it over to my colleagues as we wrap this conversation up.
Thank you for those words, Claude, and I thank you as well for welcoming me on the show today. And for me and for us, for our family, and everyone that's followed the struggle with my father, is that we've had so much support, and that we're so grateful for all the kindness of words from people who are encouraging us in this struggle. It's urgent. It's very scary because he's currently sitting in prison in Rwanda. Every single day, I'm reminded and I remember that my father is sitting in a room without windows, without light. He doesn't have light from 5 p.m. until 7 a.m. They're completely cut it all up. Just this as a form of torture, because he had the audacity to hope, and to hope for a better future for Rwandans, to hope and for peace and for justice for Rwandans. And it's a shame that this government is trying to silence and to repress all these voices that are wanting to bring a better world, to bring about change for the Rwandan people. Every single day we fight, and every single day we do our best to not only expose this government's abuses, but also to speak up for the others that are in my father's conditions, and to hope that by doing this, we're not bending our knees. We're not bending for this dictatorship. We are showing them that this is not okay, that they cannot do this to people and expect to get away with it. We've seen that now around the world, people are waking up. People are realizing that it's not a government has lied and has misled and is hurting and is doing so much wrong to its own people. And more people are with us. And the fact is, we need all Rwandans to also stand up and realize and accept and stand up with us and realize that this government has to be held accountable for its crimes. And they need to stop hurting people as they have hurt so many of us. And so just to conclude, I think the message here is that we've seen their methods, we've seen the way they do go about things, and the strategy, and the most important strategy, is to continue to shed light on it, to speak about it, to share our stories, because once the stories are out there, once people know about it, then it's harder for the Rwandan government to continue to share these lights. And oftentimes people, when we speak about like this, they call us all these names, they intimidate us, they try to hurt us. But the fact is, we're doing this because we believe in that everyone deserves their human rights to be respected. So don't be intimidated or don't be threatened by these words being thrown around, because they're being thrown around to silence us, to make us fear. And so if anything, the courage that we must have is to continue to speak up and continue to expose it, because once it's out there, then they can no longer control it. They can no longer continue to lie. And we need those lies to stop in order for the people to have peace. And I hope that my father will have peace as well and come home as soon as possible, as soon as we continue to expose these crimes.
Guys, thank you so much, Claude. So much, Corinne. I want to end up my remarks by just going back to Mrs. Idamage, Paul Rusesabagina, Bahati Innocent, Karasila Emab, and Dio Mushaidi. But in particular, Miss Idamage. Most of you do not know her. And she just literally appeared on the scene almost like a hurricane. This woman, she had said something that's stuck in my mind. She said that even though she's speaking out, she wants the people to know that she's not mentally challenged. She's not sick. She's not physically sick. She's not mentally sick. She doesn't want to grab any sheets and commit suicide. She doesn't want to be found on the street, tripped up, or a vehicle run over her as an accident. She has named all kinds of forms of killings that's being utilized today as as a fallback or explanation as to how someone has been murdered. She say, "I am not none of that." She's speaking up, saying she has 4 children who are still young. She would rather be caring for them, giving them the attention, the love, the security, and the protection that her family should be offering. But in turn, she got exposed the same way that myself, Claude and Corinne, and so many others are exposed. She has had enough of it in Rwanda. But one of the reasons why I'm highlighting her the most, she is the very first person ever to speak up against the heinous acts of violence, atrocious, heinous crime in Rwanda. She's speaking up without sugarcoating anything. She's speaking up the way it is. She's not afraid of nobody, yet she's afraid because at any given moment, her life can be terminated. I want to plead on her behalf. I want to plead on behalf of those voiceless voice in Rwanda. Please come to our rescue. At any given time, the Rwandan government is plotting to terminate her. We are not afraid to say that because they have already attempted. The same way they successfully terminated Kizito, the same way they successfully terminated so many others. Ladies and gentlemen, we know what's happening right now. So I want to urge, especially donor countries to Rwanda, call them out. Literally call them out. You know, in Rwanda, we understand one language, money. When we know that you will squeeze the money that we have, we literally would do anything to stop it. So they understand language that you are providing, that you are enabling. So we are pleading that help us out here. I want to live to be 90 if that's how many years God has given me. I know very much that Miss Idamage would love to see her sons and daughters grow up, to be married, to be handed over to somebody. The same way your son and your daughter, you want to see them growing, you perhaps having grandchildren. I would love to have all of that. I don't think it's so much to ask. Why can't we have that? If I can have it here in the United States, if Korean can manage to have that in Europe, if Claude can have it, those of us who are in a safe environment, why is it that Miss Idamange can't have that? Why is it that Karasila Emab can't have that? Why is it that Deo Mushaidi and his family cannot have that? That's all I'm asking. Just be considerate of the third world country. We are also human beings, just like anybody in the first world country. Claude, I know you wanted to say something before we wrap it up. Please, by all means, come back on the screen and share with us.
I'm not going to take long. I just wanted to, you spoke about donor nations, and I think actually donor nations should stop aid to Rwanda until Rwanda respects human rights. And on top of that, we are going to start a boycott of companies tied to the RPF, and this is going to be a global movement, and we would like for everybody to join so that the RPF, the party that Kagame leads, it's one of the richest parties in the world. They have robbed Rwanda blind. They have robbed the Congo blind, and we want to make sure that we use the all the tools. If I can use the South Africa example, the boycotts in South Africa, that was very successful against apartheid. By the way, the apartheid government called Mandela a terrorist. So classic, what the RPF is doing, classic. So let's hit them in the pocket, both from donor nations, but also ourselves. And if we can make that commitment and make that commitment globally, this regime can really, really be brought to its knees. We are not going on our knees. That is not going to happen. We rather die than be on our knees. That's how it's going to be. And so, but we are going to continue to push until this regime comes down on its knees.
And just to add on to this, Claude, and for the idea of stopping the aid to Rwanda, is that one important point to realize is that the money doesn't actually reach everyday Rwandans. The money stays within the elite, to the small elite, and used by the Rwandan government to charter a private jet to kidnap people from across borders to bring them to Rwanda. The money is being used to intimidate people, to surveil them anywhere in the world, to go and buy and pay off people to then go and kill others. So this money is not being used in the way that people who are donating this money are intended to be used for. Instead, it's doing very evil things. So one way to help us in this is to stop giving money to Rwanda. If you want to give money, give it directly to the people, not to this government, not to the RPF government.
Thank you, Karine. I don't have anything else to add. I just want to thank the audience for following and sticking with us. I apologize for the technical difficulties that we ran into at the very beginning, and I wanted to turn it over to Freeman.
Thank you, Claude, and thank you so much, Corinne, Claude, and so many speaking up. I know that we don't have it easy, and I actually want to commend all our peers. Guys, we're not that old, okay? But the fact that we have forgot so many things to speak up, I think we are worth it. We are worth every bit of moment that we have ever spent on the affairs of the Burundi's people. When I see Corinne, she has so many things that she could be doing right now. When I see Claude, there are so many things that they should be doing right now. Their families, all our families, but we cannot. We might be here in the United States or in Europe or somewhere that you are where you feel a bit safe. But I'm telling you, when your uncle, when your cousin, when your brother or sister in the country is telling you that I'm not sure if tomorrow will be my last day, there's no way you can sleep with a heart and a peace of mind at the end of the night. And so I want to encourage all of you to come out and speak up. Come up and speak up. Evil is evil. No matter how you want to dress it, evil is evil. But I really want to say, come up and speak up, tell your story. Let's literally push back. Last but not least, I cannot thank enough all the sponsors who really made this event possible. And the sponsors are Friends of the Congo, the African Great Lakes Action Network, Black Star News, and HMG Studio. Guys, we have so much more content, very life-changing content. I want to bear and ask all of you to please support us so we can speak our story. Support us so we can say, we can just literally chase evil out and not be afraid that we are going to lose our life for speaking up, especially speaking up the truth. That's what's most important. And with that in mind, guys, I also want to I want to say goodbye. I want to say thank you. I don't have the words to express what I'm feeling today, but I just want to say thank you. With humble, I want to say thank you. And until next time, so long.